She was left at the altar with a newborn baby girl, until the silent rancher walked in and took them home as his own. Dust Creek, Montana Territory, winter 1876. The wind howled across the frozen hills, flinging snow into spirals like restless spirits. On a small rise stood Dust Creek's only church, its steeple wrapped in ice, the bell above ringing hollow into the gray morning. Inside, candles flickered, but warmth was absent. All eyes were on the altar. Evelyn stood alone, trembling. Her white dress, borrowed and badly fitted, clung to her frame. In her arms, swaddled in a thin shawl, was her newborn daughter, Lily, just 3 days old. Daniel was gone. That morning, she had woken to find his belongings gone, no note, no explanation. He had promised her marriage, safety, a future. But the pews behind her were emptying, the whispers cruel. Mrs. Thorne, Daniel's mother, marched down the aisle, her voice, sharp as ice, sliced through the silence. "You've humiliated this family enough. You think bringing your bastard child here gets you a name? Get out." Evelyn's voice barely rose above a whisper. "He asked me to marry him." "He's not here, is he?" the woman hissed. "And he won't be. We don't take in beggars and whores." 2 of Daniel's cousins stepped forward. One gestured toward the doors. "You heard her. Time to go." The priest said nothing. He stepped back, letting it happen. Evelyn's breath caught. She tightened her hold on Lily. "Please, I just need—" "You need to leave." They shoved the church doors open. Wind and snow blasted through. Evelyn staggered as they pushed her forward. Her shoes slid on the icy steps. She fell, one arm curling around Lily, shielding the infant from the cold. The heavy doors slammed shut behind her. Alone. The wind cut through her dress like blades. Her knees stung where they hit the steps. The snow soaked through the fabric instantly. She blinked against the white sky and pulled Lily closer. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her lips numb. "I thought today would be our beginning." Lily whimpered softly. Evelyn's limbs felt heavy. Her chest ached. Her body, still raw from childbirth, had no strength left. The world tilted. She slumped sideways, barely conscious, one hand still on her daughter's back. Snowflakes melted against her cheek. Hoofbeats echoed over the ridge. Silas Holt had been returning from town, leading his horse and a sack of oats. He was a quiet man, rarely seen in church or saloons, living alone on the edge of Dust Creek, where no one asked questions. As he passed the church, something caught his eye. Movement. He stopped and squinted through the falling snow. A figure on the steps. He approached, boots crunching through the drift. His horse snorted behind him, restless. It was a girl, maybe 20, a wedding dress soaked through, her face white with cold. Silas crouched beside her. There was a baby in her arms. He pulled back the shawl slightly. The infant blinked, breath fast and shallow, cheeks red from the cold. The girl stirred. Her eyes fluttered open just enough to see him. "Please," she whispered, "don't leave her. Not in the snow." Her head fell back. Silas looked at the church, dark, silent. No help was coming. His jaw tightened. He carefully gathered the girl and child into his arms. She was so light it made something twist in his chest. The baby didn't cry. She just stared at him, eyes wide. He mounted his horse, settling both in front of him, then turned away from the church. Snow swirled around them, erasing their tracks almost as soon as they formed. Behind him, the church bell tolled once more, cold, hollow, final. But Silas didn't look back. He pulled his coat tighter around the girl and her child, gave his horse a soft nudge, and rode slowly into the storm. Silas's ranch sat at the base of Windbreak Ridge, hidden behind a thicket of tall firs and a snow-drifted fence that leaned from years of wind and neglect. The house itself was small, hand-built from uneven planks, the roof patched with old shingles and tar paper. A narrow column of smoke curled from the chimney as Silas rode up, Evelyn limp against his chest, her newborn daughter swaddled tightly in her arms. Inside, the air was warm, thick with the scent of pine, smoke, and well-worn leather. An old shaggy dog lifted its head from beside the hearth, gave a low woof of greeting, then set its chin back on its paws. Silas laid Evelyn gently on the cot near the stove and covered her with a heavy wool blanket. She didn't stir. The baby blinked up at him from the folds of her mother's shawl. He knelt, tugged off his gloves, and carefully unwrapped the bundle. "You're quiet," he muttered, more to himself than her. Her tiny hand found his thumb and curled tight. He looked back at Evelyn, pale, exhausted, her jaw clenched even in sleep. The hurt on her face was more than just cold. It was something deeper, something old. He didn't know her name, didn't need to, not yet. When Evelyn awoke, hours later, the firelight painted flickering shapes across the rough plank walls. For a moment she didn't know where she was. Then she saw Lily, asleep in a bundle beside the hearth. She tried to sit up, but groaned. The door opened with a gust of wind and cold. Silas stepped in, stomping snow from his boots, carrying an armload of firewood. He paused when he saw her awake. "You're up," he said, setting the wood down by the stove. Evelyn clutched the blanket closer. "Where am I?" "My place," he answered simply. "You passed out." "And Lily?" "Still in one piece, loud but alive." She narrowed her eyes. "Why'd you bring us here?" "Frou." He shrugged. "Didn't seem right leaving you there. You don't even know who I am." "Nope." "Maybe you should have walked on by." He crouched and added a log to the fire. "Could've, didn't." Evelyn watched him, tall, broad, with weathered hands and a quiet calm. His face was rough around the edges, but not unkind. The cabin was simple. No signs of family. No lace curtains or embroidered pillows. Just a chair, a worn saddle, a lantern, and a Bible resting on a windowsill. "You live here alone?" He nodded. "Me and Boone." The old dog gave a tail wag in response. Evelyn looked back at her sleeping baby. "How long can we stay?" Silas met her gaze. His eyes were steady, slate gray. "As long as you need," he said. "Ain't much here, but it's warm." She looked down. "We won't be trouble." "You already are," he replied. "That's all right." That night, Lily would not stop crying. Evelyn, sore and still fevered, tried everything, rocking, singing, bouncing gently, but the baby's cries only grew. Her arms ached, her head pounded, her own eyes stung with tears. She whispered to Lily, "Please, I'm trying." Then, from behind her came a low voice, "Let me take her." She turned, surprised. Silas stood in his undershirt, boots unlaced, face tired but calm. "You don't have to," she said. "I know." After a long moment, she passed the baby to him. He held Lily awkwardly at first, adjusting his grip like someone used to saddles, not infants. But his arms were steady, and Lily quieted just a little at the warmth. He wrapped her in his coat, pulled on his boots, and stepped outside. Evelyn sat in silence, listening. Then she moved to the window. Outside, under the pale moonlight, she saw Silas leading his horse from the barn. He mounted with Lily cradled to his chest, riding slow, quiet loops through the snow. He wasn't singing, just murmuring softly to the baby. Evelyn's hand rested on the glass, cold against her skin. No one had ever done something like that, not for her, not for Lily. A stranger, a man with no reason to care. Her throat tightened. She returned to the cot and lay down, listening to the faint sound of hoofbeats outside. The wind softened, and her baby's cries finally stilled. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Evelyn slept. The snow did not let up. Day after day the wind clawed at the windows, the chimney groaned, and the ranch disappeared into a world of white silence. Inside, Evelyn burned with fever. It came on fast, a flush in her cheeks, then chills, then a breathless heaviness that left her weak. At first, she brushed it off as exhaustion, but by the second day, she couldn't stand. Silas noticed. He didn't say anything. That night, he brought her a bowl of steaming broth. It smelled bland, a little burnt, but warm. He set it beside her, You need to eat. Evelyn turned to the wall. I'm fine. You're not. His voice was quiet but certain. She didn't argue again. She tried to lift the spoon, but her hands trembled. Silas hesitated, then picked it up and fed her, awkward but patient. He never asked why she cried. For 2 more days he nursed her, boiled water, changed linens, sponged her brow. He bounced Lily through the night, trying to hum lullabies he barely remembered. The baby spit up on him more than once. He never flinched. Boone, his old dog, watched with quiet approval, as if witnessing something long overdue. By week's end, the fever broke. Evelyn woke to a dim room, her throat dry, Lily sleeping beside her. On the hearth, Silas sat dozing, holding Lily's tiny shirt, half dried from washing. She stared at him, this man, who had asked nothing, done everything. Later, she whispered into the quiet, "He left me, Daniel." Silas looked up from the fire. "He said he loved me, said we'd run away, but on our wedding day, he just didn't come." Silas didn't interrupt. "His family called me a whore, said the baby wasn't his, said I trapped him." Silas's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. Evelyn stared into the flames. "Maybe I was just foolish." "That doesn't make you wrong," Silas said softly. "Just makes you human." She glanced at him. "You don't seem like someone who takes strangers in." "I don't." "Then why me?" He paused. "My sister, Clara, died 2 winters ago. Fever swept through town. She was 16. I'm sorry. She used to read to me, told me the world was bigger than fences and chores. When she died, everything got small again." He looked down. "When I saw you in the snow, it reminded me of her, not your face. The way you were holding that baby, like she was the last thing left that mattered." In the days that followed, they slipped into rhythm. Evelyn remained guarded, like a door slightly ajar, never fully open. But there were cracks. One morning, they fed the horses together. Evelyn stood nearby, watching him shovel hay with steady arms. "Do they all have names?" she asked, nodding toward the stalls. "Most of them. That one's Penny, she bites." Duly noted. She caught him glancing at her. He looked away quickly. She blushed. Another afternoon, Lily peed on Silas mid-diaper change. He froze, stunned. Evelyn burst into laughter. Silas blinked, then chuckled too. He peeled off the shirt. "You got something against clean clothes?" he asked Lily. "She has taste," Evelyn said. That night, Evelyn sat alone while Lily slept. The fire popped gently. The house was quiet. And she realized she was smiling, for no reason at all, thinking of Silas's face, Lily's laugh, the strange softness of this place that was not yet home but no longer foreign. The smile faded. She placed a hand over her heart, trying to hold the feeling down. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something, and that scared her more than the cold. The snow softened into slush by the 2nd week of March. Trees stood bare and brittle, and the wind still bit when it passed, but the world no longer seemed locked in white silence. Inside the cabin, something had begun to thaw too. Evelyn woke one morning to find a rifle leaning by the door and Silas polishing its barrel. "I want you to know how to use it," he said simply. She blinked at him, then at the rifle. "You think someone's coming?" "Not yet, but it's not about them. It's about you." He showed her how to hold the weapon, how to brace it tight to her shoulder, how to breathe before the shot. They used bottles as targets lined along the fence, and each time she missed, he adjusted her grip with the lightest touch, never pushing, never scolding. "You're allowed to protect yourself," he said once, after she lowered the rifle too quickly. "That doesn't make you hard, it just means you're alive." Something about that stuck. Back inside, Evelyn moved more confidently. She began mending her old dress, stitching seams with careful fingers, while Lily napped in a pile of folded quilts. When Silas came in to see flour dusting the counter and biscuits rising in the fire oven, he paused like he had walked into a dream. "Smells like Sunday," he murmured. She smiled, just a little. "It's Wednesday." He tasted one without a word. nodded, and walked out again. But the biscuit was gone before he reached the barn. A few days later, she came back from the river with her arms full of laundry to find a strange shape propped up on the porch. Wooden slats, rounded edges, small and solid. A cradle, handmade. She stepped closer and saw the name carved on the curved headboard. Lily. Her knees gave a little. She sat on the step beside it, tears streaming freely. The ache in her chest sharp and full. He hadn't said a word about it, but he had carved her daughter's name with his own hands. And something in her cracked open. They had settled into something that was not quite a routine, but it wasn't survival anymore either. It was life, quiet, tender, and cautious, but of course the outside world had its say. It started with looks at the general store, glances stretched too long, whispers behind sacks of feed. Then, one morning, a knock. Evelyn startled. Silas opened the door to find Martha, a stout, no-nonsense widow from the ranch over the hill, standing with a pie in her hands and her eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Brought peach," she said, stepping in without waiting. She glanced once at Evelyn, then at Lily sleeping in the cradle. She didn't comment, didn't question, just set the pie down and took a seat by the fire. "I was married 36 years, Martha said, voice low. "Loved that man till the day he died, even if he did snore like a train and forget my birthday every year." Evelyn blinked, unsure what to say. Martha turned to Silas. "Folks'll talk. Doesn't mean they know a damn thing." Then to Evelyn, "A good man's not always the one who talks the most. Sometimes he's just the one who stays when you need him." She took a slice of her own pie, chewed thoughtfully, then nodded at the cradle. "Pretty work," she said. "Better than what we had." And just like that, she left. That night, Evelyn sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea Silas had brewed with wild herbs. Lily slept peacefully in the cradle nearby. The snow had stopped. Moonlight spilled silver across the fields. She looked over at Silas, who was sharpening a tool near the fire, eyes quiet. "I didn't think," she started, then paused. Her voice cracked unexpectedly. "I didn't think I'd ever be treated kindly again." Silas didn't look up right away. He finished his stroke along the blade, then set the knife aside. He stood, walked to her slowly, and crouched beside the chair. Then, without a word, he placed his rough, calloused hand over hers. She looked down at their joined hands, so simple, so steady. She didn't move, and neither did he. There was no confession, no sudden kiss, no promises whispered into the dark. Just warmth, just the sound of Lily breathing, and the touch of a man who said more in silence than most could in a lifetime. By early April, the thaw reached the town. What started as murmurs behind shelves in the general store turned into pointed whispers across the churchyard. Women in pressed dresses and men with polished boots began to speak of that girl. The one left at the altar. The one with the newborn. The one who now lived with the silent rancher who hadn't shown his face in town in years. "Shame," they said. "Scandal," they nodded. "Pity," someone muttered. But no one dared say it near the ranch. Evelyn noticed it first when the mailman started leaving letters at the end of the drive, no longer walking up to the porch. She didn't care about the gossip, until the carriage came. It was polished black with wheels that barely touched mud, and it arrived one clear morning without warning, cutting a clean path through the ranch gate. Evelyn saw it from the window and froze. She knew that carriage. The door opened and out stepped a woman in a high-collared coat, every button gleaming. Her gray hair was pinned tight under a feathered hat, and her shoes never sank into the dirt. Margaret Harrow, Daniel's mother. Evelyn felt her knees go weak. Silas had been chopping wood out back, but when he heard the crunch of carriage wheels, he stepped around the side of the house, wiping his hands on his trousers. Margaret didn't wait for a greeting. She eyed the cabin, then the barn, then the cradle visible through the open door. "I came," she said, voice clipped, "to see the child." Evelyn gathered Lily in her arms and stepped out onto the porch. Her heart pounded in her throat. "She's not yours," Evelyn said, though her voice trembled. "I never said she was," Margaret replied smoothly, climbing the steps with unnatural grace. "But Daniel was my son, and now he's gone. Our name, what's left of it, matters. That child is his blood. She belongs in the city, with family, with people who can raise her properly." Evelyn tightened her hold around Lily. "No," she whispered. "Don't be foolish, girl," Margaret snapped. "You think raising her here, in dirt and horse stench, is kindness?" She reached forward, but her hand never made it. Silas stepped between them. No sound, no force. He simply stood there, still, unmoving. But something in his stance, the way he held his shoulders like a mountain refusing to yield, made Margaret recoil slightly. "Mr. Whitaker," she said tightly, adjusting her gloves. "You may think this arrangement charming, but we both know it's improper. This girl is not your wife. That child is not your daughter." Silas said nothing, but he didn't step aside, and he didn't lower his gaze. For a moment, the ranch was so quiet, the birds seemed to hush. Margaret looked at him, then at Evelyn, then at the baby. "I see," she said finally, the chill in her voice sharper than the lingering frost. "You'll regret this." She turned with military precision, descended the steps, and climbed into her carriage. The wheels creaked as they rolled away. Silas stayed at the top of the stairs, arms at his sides, eyes still on the gate long after the dust settled. Evelyn stood frozen behind him, Lily warm against her chest, her heart beating loud and uncertain. When he finally turned to her, she wanted to speak, anything. But no words came, so she simply looked at him, and he at her. And in that quiet, something shifted. This wasn't a man who helped out of pity, who rescued once and left the next day. He hadn't said a single word to Margaret. He hadn't needed to. His silence had drawn a line in the earth, and for the first time, Evelyn saw it. Silas wasn't just the man who had picked her up from the snow. He was the one who stayed when others turned away. The one who built a cradle and taught her to shoot. The one who held her baby through the night and never asked for anything in return. The one who stood in the doorway and with no voice said, "You will not take them from me." And she believed him. The frost melted slowly that year, as if the earth itself was unsure whether to trust the sun again. But once it did, the ranch came alive. Silas rose early, turning over soil by the fence line, boots sinking into soft earth. Evelyn joined him after feeding Lily, her sleeves rolled, fingers learning the feel of a spade. Together they planted rows, carrots, beans, onions, a little late in the season, but still time enough. When Silas showed her how to check the chicken coop for eggs, Evelyn laughed for the first time in weeks. One of the hens pecked his hat off, and Lily, perched on Evelyn's hip, squealed in delight. They worked side by side, day by day, fixing a broken fence, cleaning the barn, building a new shelf for supplies. At night, they sat by the fire, the air filled with quiet hums, the occasional baby coo, and the low creak of wood expanding with warmth. Evelyn started mending Silas's shirts. At first, her stitches were uneven, but he wore them anyway. When he noticed a fresh patch on the elbow of his coat, he didn't say a word. Just looked at her a little longer that morning. He began carrying Lily in a sling he made from old linen. She fit snug against his chest, her little hands gripping his shirt as he moved from stall to stall. When she cried, he'd walk slow circles near the fence, whispering things Evelyn couldn't hear, and somehow she'd quiet. Sometimes Evelyn would pause mid-task, watching them through the open window, his wide shoulders curved protectively, Lily's cheek pressed against him like she had never belonged anywhere else. One evening, the sky burned gold with sunset. Evelyn sat sewing by the hearth, Lily asleep in her cradle, the soft creak of Silas sanding a new drawer filling the silence. The rhythm was peaceful, gentle. She didn't know when her head began to nod, but by the time the last stitch was tied, sleep had claimed her. She slumped sideways on the wooden chair, the thread still looped between her fingers. Silas noticed only when the room went quiet. He turned, saw her there, mouth slightly open, hair loose over one shoulder, exhaustion written in the slant of her frame. Gently, he set down the wood, walked over, and knelt. He took the needle from her fingers, then the spool, then reached behind her to pull the blanket from the armrest. As he lifted it over her, she stirred slightly. Her hand, still curled from sewing, brushed against his. Instinctively he started to pull away, but her fingers closed around his, not tight, not pleading. Just there. She didn't open her eyes, didn't speak, but her hand held his like it had always meant to. Silas froze, and then, slowly, he sat beside her, still on the floor, letting his hand remain in hers. They stayed like that for a long time. When the fire dimmed and the room darkened into shadow, she woke, blinking, confused, then softening as her gaze fell on him. "Silas," she said, voice barely more than breath. He looked up at her, his jaw tense, eyes unreadable. But he didn't move, neither did she. Her fingers shifted slightly, brushing his knuckles. And then, without a word, she leaned forward. The kiss was not planned, not rehearsed, not even expected. It was gentle, barely a whisper of pressure, just a meeting of warmth and breath. But it lingered, and when they parted, neither smiled, neither laughed. They just looked at each other, and something settled, not like thunder, not like a flare, but like a door quietly clicking shut behind them, or a candle being lit in a dark hallway. Evelyn didn't say she loved him. Silas didn't speak at all. But when she stood to check on Lily, and he rose to pick up the dropped sewing, something between them had changed. That night, as they moved through the last tasks of the evening, dousing lamps, checking windows, stacking wood, the silence felt full. And when they passed each other near the cradle, their hands brushed again. This time, neither one let go. By April, the thaw was complete. Ice gave way to running streams, and wildflowers burst through soil rich with promise. Evelyn stood at the edge of the field, Lily in her arms, the baby's small fist tangled in her mother's shawl. The scent of warm grass lingered in the breeze. Behind her, Silas stacked wood with slow, even movements. Boone dozed in the sun nearby, tail twitching softly. Evelyn turned. "You don't have to do this," she said, breaking the stillness. Silas looked up. "Do what?" She shifted Lily slightly. "Take us in. Carry my past. Everything." He paused, wiping his hands on his trousers. Then he walked toward her. When he reached them, he didn't speak at first, just rested a hand lightly on Lily's back. "I'm not carrying anything," he said simply. "I just hold on to what I don't want to lose." Evelyn swallowed hard, Lily gurgled softly, and Silas smiled. A few days later, Martha came by with a pie and a knowing look. "Spring's here," she said, placing the pie on the table. "And so is a traveling minister. I know a spot by the creek, quiet, full of lilacs, perfect for vows." Evelyn blinked. "Vows?" Martha raised an eyebrow. "It's a home now. Time to name it one." Silas said nothing, but his eyes met Evelyn's across the room. The next morning, under cottonwoods, just beginning to bloom, they stood beside the creek. It wasn't grand. Martha held Lily. Boone lay at their feet. The minister was brief, his voice warm and gentle. Evelyn wore her mended dress, hair pulled back in soft curls. Silas wore his Sunday shirt, clean pressed, with a sprig of lilac tucked at the collar. When the minister nodded to Silas, he hesitated, then spoke. "She came with the snow," he said, "and for a long time I thought the snow was all there was, quiet, cold." His voice faltered slightly, but he continued. "But she brought life into this place, laughter, fire, a child's breath against my chest. She made it a home again." He looked at Evelyn. "She came with the snow," he said softer now, "but I knew from the start she was warmth." Evelyn's eyes brimmed. She gripped his hand tighter. Lily let out a soft giggle. Martha wiped her cheek. They kissed quietly. No crowd. No applause. Only the sound of water and wind. As they walked back to the cabin, Evelyn slipped her hand into his. Silas leaned in and whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "You're safe now." Evelyn didn't speak. She only rested her head on his shoulder and smiled. The ranch didn't ask for much, just steady hands, warm fires, and time. Seasons passed. Lily grew. Her legs wobbled through the vegetable patch, chasing chickens with squeals. Her first tooth arrived in a thunderstorm. Her first laugh echoed in the barn as Silas mucked stalls. Evelyn often watched from the doorway. Silas, once all silence, now carried Lily on his shoulders, pointing at hawks overhead or crouching to show her garden worms. Evelyn stitched curtains, baked pies. Silas pretended not to devour, and wrote late at night. Beside the bed sat her journal. Worn, soft at the corners, every page began, "To my daughter, Lily." She wrote of snow and silence, of a man with kind eyes who didn't ask questions, of blankets and fever and a cradle of old pine.